All right, all right. Welcome everyone to Hope Reforms Raising Anchor 2026 virtual conference, and I couldn't be more thrilled to bring to you today my brother from another mother, a man who has been as personally inspirational to me as he's been to so many people who are trying to get upstream in workplace violence prevention. James Sporleder from the state of Ohio. Hope Reform is a accreditation and certification agency that serves organizations offering crisis services. Those organizations very often are in need of technical assistance in reaching gold standards of excellence in their crisis care and crisis services. And Hope Reform is here for them with a board that consists of globally known experts, which includes the great James Sporleder, who's with us today. We'd love it if you'd visit hopereform.org and consider a donation. The organization is a nonprofit corporation registered in the state of Washington as a charity and a 501c3. And the reason that we think it is so important that accreditation and certification agencies are nonprofit is to eliminate the pay to play phenomena that can occur so often in any kind of certification effort. Hope Reform accreditation or certification must be earned. It is reliable and living and active in the organization's culture itself, in the people that represent the leadership, and in the direct services setting. And we take the business of reaching standards of excellence very seriously. It's not just talking points for us. That certification is something that if you see that on an organization, you can expect excellence in the care and services they provide in the crisis context. James Sporleder has been a professional colleague of mine now for probably somewhere on the order of about 10 years or more. His work in synthesizing trauma-responsive principles in workplace violence prevention is a direct product of his lived experience, which I'm sure James will get into to some extent, in some very unique settings that enabled him to really experience the human element in resolving systemic problems of harm and suffering. Getting living and active principles upstream is all about the right vision, the right mindset, and the right values. And James embodies all of those things. James, welcome to Raising Anchor 2026. It's great to have
you. Thank you. It's great to be here. Glad to have this opportunity to share with you all today. I've got some ideas. I was telling Andy before we got started that some of this is a little bit of a thought exercise, because I think we're pressing into some areas regarding interpersonal violence awareness and prevention that doesn't have a full embodied lexicon yet. There's some language that we're looking to add complexion, granularity, texture to, and I'm framing that all around the concept of resilience today, because that's the theme of our Raising Anchor thing, and so Raising Anchor virtual conference. So I want to try to bring that to you in a way that's meaningful and pragmatic, while at the same time philosophically sound and maybe just a little bit poetic.
Well, I wouldn't be surprised coming from you. I'll just quickly throw this in. There is never a meeting that is without some book reference by James for everybody. So with that, James, I'm excited to dive in. I'm going to go ahead and share your presentation on our stage.
Very good.
And I'll invite you to begin. And as ideas come up that I might feel inspired to ask you to flesh out a little more, I think I'll do that.
Absolutely. I'd welcome that. And as I mentioned to you the other day, I've got about 30 minutes of content here. So
Yeah.
I think we've got some time and opportunity to walk inside of these issues a little bit if the spirit moves you.
Yep.
So it's a pleasure to
Sounds
be with
great.
you all today. And let's just jump right in. I want to explore the concept of resilience today with all of you, but not in a way that it's often sort of casually thought about. Not as kind of a personal reserve, something that we draw down on over time, or even as the ability to withstand pressure while remaining unchanged, what you might call a kind of robustness. What I want to suggest instead is that resilience is an ongoing adaptive process. Resilience is a way that we can positively adapt to adversity, trauma, stress, and difficult conditions over time, and to do that in ways that are healthy and sustainable. I want to consider resilience in the context of an environment many of you work in every day, not just a demanding place, but one that's emotionally complex, ambiguous, and at times deeply heavy. I've come to call this place the sea of hopelessness and despair.
Yeah.
And this is a part of a psychosocial ecosystem that's part of a broader cultural and behavioral continuum that I've been evolving over the last 10 years that starts with upstream conditions of health and stability. You'll find that on the far left. And then all the way down through spaces of strain and incivility, and ultimately into environments where distress has accumulated and options feel increasingly constrained. The sea of hopelessness and despair is the farthest downstream expression of this continuum. And to understand resilience here, we have to hold the whole continuum in view, because what we encounter down here in this space is rarely the beginning of the story. It's
Right.
the visible edge of strain, stress, and disconnection that builds over time. So, in this kind of environment, there are moments that don't announce themselves with any obvious signal. Let's say, for example, you're in a conversation, maybe with a client or a colleague, or even someone you've worked with over the years. And on the surface, everything appears normal, yet something begins to feel slightly different. The tone is off by a fraction. Maybe responses become shorter. There's a pause where there normally wouldn't be one. And maybe you find yourself working a little harder to stay connected. You may not consciously register that change right away, but there's something that's shifted. And then sometimes quite rapidly, the tenor of the moment can change. Suddenly, what felt steady becomes tense. What seemed manageable becomes harder to keep stable, and what felt clear might feel uncertain now. And you're left trying to make sense of what's happening, not because you've made any mistake or misspoke in any way, but because there are layers in your interaction that aren't visible on the surface. And I'll give you an example here. There's a teaching example often used in trauma-informed care that illustrates this. And the story goes that a therapist was working with a woman who'd experienced repeated sexual abuse as a child. And at one point, she becomes emotional in the exchange, and the therapist reaches for a box of tissues and says something simple to her. He says, "Here, let me get that for you." It's an ordinary phrase. It was said with care, but for her, those were the exact words used by her abuser. In that moment, the complexion of the interaction changed immediately.
Yeah.
Now, the therapist didn't change and the intent didn't change, but the context and the meaning for her changed utterly. And that interaction then moved into a very different psychological space, shaped not only by the present, but perhaps more profoundly by the past. And so most of the situations you encounter won't look like that, but the underlying dynamic isn't rare. You know better than most that many people carry histories, or all people carry histories you can't see. And those histories shape how they perceive tone, language, proximity, and behavior, often before conscious reasoning has a chance to catch up. The nervous system is constantly scanning for patterns of safety and threat. It's our survival brain in action. It runs way faster than our logical thought processes. In fact, science indicates that it's 4 times faster than logical thought. And you'll see on that slide, I have this phrase that I learned from my good friend and colleague, Andy. It limits our diversity of thought. It limits our diversity of expression.
Yes.
And so when something is present that resembles something unresolved from the past, even subtly, you know that the response can be immediate. Not because the situation has become objectively dangerous, but because it feels familiar in a way that's both emotionally loaded and most likely emotionally unmetabolized. So this creates a challenge because in moments like this, you're not just observing the interaction, you're in it. You're trying to stay present to keep the conversation steady while something just beneath the surface is beginning to shift. And that can be disorienting because what's happening isn't always defined by your intent or even by what's visible in front of you. There are layers in the moment that you don't have full access to, and yet you're still required to respond. So you may find yourself making decisions in real time, adjusting, recalibrating, trying to stay connected and to keep things from slipping. And you don't always get the benefit of clarity. That's the terrain you're navigating. And the question it raises is this: what allows you to stay steady, effective, and grounded in moments like that, particularly over time? And this is really where we get after the concept of resilience.
Yeah.
And so, how do we define it? And so, as I define resilience here as this adaptive process I've been referring to, I'm using the term in a way that says resilience is the process of successfully adapting to adversity, trauma, stress, or significant challenges over time and continuing to function or returning to functioning in ways that are both healthy and sustainable. The quality of that adaptation is shaped in part by how we perceive, interpret, and respond to what we're experiencing, often in real time. So my focus here is on what actually shapes and enhances our resilience, especially in the difficult psychosocial environments that many of you find yourself in. Now, when I refer to the sea of hopelessness and despair, I'm not using metaphor for its own sake. I'm trying to name a type of psychosocial environment that many of you already recognize. These are environments where people are often carrying unresolved trauma, chronic stress, loss, or instability, and even mental illness. Situations here are rarely cleanly defined, and outcomes are often uncertain or unresolved.
Yeah.
The signals you rely on here are many times incomplete or difficult to interpret, and what's visible on the surface doesn't always reflect what's happening underneath. This is an environment that embodies what Father Greg Boyle so accurately describes as a lethal absence of hope. I think that's
Oh my gosh, yes.
carries such a gravitas, right? And importantly, you're not just observing these environments from a distance, you're inside of them. And that distinction matters because it means the environment is not only shaping the people you're working with, it's also shaping you, not through a single moment per se, but through repeated exposure to heightened emotional charge, tension, ambiguity, and even the threat of aggression or violence. And over time, these kinds of conditions begin to influence what you notice, what you interpret, and how you respond.
James, if I could, I'm feeling
Yeah.
inspired.
Yes.
um, you know, you didn't mention it at the beginning, but I want to bring it out and I want to tie another thought to it.
Mhm.
You have a professional experience in bringing home people in captivity in other parts of the world. You have an experience in that where you were exposed to human beings that were living with what could be described as a lethal absence of hope. They didn't know if they were going to be
Mhm.
rescued or recovered,
Mhm.
and they were living with only whatever hope they could muster on their own. And when I was thinking about that as you were talking about the slide, and I'd love for you to just elaborate for a moment about that experience, I remember someone many, many years ago. I used to do some work with someone from the special operations community who used to refer to the data on the number of people that died from less than lethal injury because they believed that there
Yes.
was no hope.
Yes.
And on the opposite side of that, there were people who had such constitution and fortitude that anyone would look at them and think that they sustained injuries that were lethal, but they believed they weren't going to perish. And they
Mhm.
survived multiple gunshots,
Yeah.
multiple
Yeah.
serious injuries in some kind of incident attached to their duties. Maybe you could just speak into the power of that
Oh
a little
gosh.
bit.
Well, my background was in special survival training for high risk of capture individuals in the military, and we bake that down to the will to survive. That's how we
Yes.
put it out. And the reality was, the will to survive can be taught and nurtured, and that is grounded on this concept of hope.
Yeah.
And oftentimes, when people ask me to talk about what I did and what does survival mean in those kinds of situations, I would say, well, in a survival environment, you could survive as much as 30 days or more without food, and you can survive about 3 days without water, and maybe about 3 minutes without air, but you can't survive 3 seconds without hope. That's how I
Yeah.
would describe that. So that's why this lethal absence of hope is so such a devastating, true aspect. And I think that's part of what we attempt to do, walking alongside the folks that we service in Hope Reform, is to help restore this concept of hope
Oh,
uh,
I couldn't
within.
have said it better. Thank you for that, James. Please,
For
please
sure.
continue by all
You
means.
bet. My pleasure. So this begs the question then, right? What does this sea of hopelessness and despair actually do to us? It doesn't remain external. Over time, it begins to shape our internal experience, how we feel, how we think, how we relate, and how we function. And it rarely happens through a single defining moment. It develops cumulatively through repeated exposure to emotionally charged conditions, unresolved interactions, and situations that can carry a heavy moral weight without clear resolution. And day after day, these experiences leave a trace. They can be subtle and gradual and easy to overlook if we're not paying attention. But when we do look more closely, the impact does tend to show up across several consistent domains. Emotionally, we can find that there's often a narrowing, not necessarily overwhelm, but a reduction in what feels possible. Our patience can shorten, our openness gives way to something flatter or more constrained. And in some cases, particularly in high demand environments, this can take the form of emotional numbing,
Yeah.
not because a person no longer cares, but because the stray voltage of sustained and intense emotional exposure can be difficult to effectively metabolize time and time again. And the impact isn't only emotional, it's also physiological. You may notice a baseline level of tension in yourself that doesn't fully resolve, even outside of work. Perhaps you experience fatigue that isn't fully restored by rest. You might even notice a sense of ongoing activation, as though your nervous system remains partially engaged, even when the moment doesn't require it. And this aligns with what we know about how our nervous systems scan for cues of safety and threat, often outside of our overt awareness. In environments where those cues are inconsistent or ambiguous, your system adapts by maintaining an elevated degree of readiness and even a vigilance or even hypervigilance. And over time, that adaptation comes with a cost. Cognitively, similar shifts can occur. Mental clarity can devolve into a kind of mental fog. Thinking becomes more pattern based and less exploratory. You may find yourself arriving more quickly at conclusions like, well, this isn't going to change, or we've all seen this before. And decision making can feel heavier, and sustained attention takes more cognitive effort. Now, the changes aren't signs of diminished capability. They simply reflect the mind's adaptation to repeated exposure to situations where effort doesn't consistently lead to clarity or resolution. And then finally, relationally, the impact can be just as significant. Connection begins to feel more costly. There may be subtle movement toward distance, not full disengagement, but a form of self protection. You might remain present and functional, but with an increased sense of guardedness. Empathy doesn't necessarily disappear, but it may become more regulated or constrained, not as a failure of care, but as an adaptive response to conditions where staying regulated inside of repeated, unmodulated emotional engagement becomes more difficult to sustain long term. Across these domains, a consistent pattern of adaptation emerges. And they're not signs of personal deficiency. It's just important to remember that they're indicators of adaptation, you adapting to this extreme environment. Well, this then begs the natural question: if these environments are shaping how we feel and think and relate and function, then where, if anywhere, do we have influence in environments like this? It can be easy to assume that adaptation simply happens to us, that over time the environment does its work and we simply adjust sort of passively. And there's some truth in that, but it's not the whole picture. Even within these extreme conditions, there are opportunities for influence. They're not always obvious and they're not always easy to access in the moment, but they are there.
Yeah.
They show up in three closely related processes that we've already alluded to. Opportunities for influence show up inside of how we perceive what's happening, how we interpret what we're perceiving, and how we respond. And these processes are continuous, dynamic, and adaptive. So let's take a look at each one of them and find the opportunities for influence. Perception. This is what we notice. In any interaction, there are countless signals available: tone, posture, pacing, language, even silence, but we don't register all of them. Our attention is selective, shaped by our life experiences, our histories, and the environments we've seen before. In high stress or ambiguous environments, our perception often narrows. Our attention is drawn more quickly to what feels uncertain or potentially risky. And that narrowing isn't a flaw, it's an adaptation. But it also means that what we notice is not neutral. So I'm kind of driving my fist there on the table. This is where influence can begin, because while we don't control everything that catches our attention, we can choose to gently widen our view, to notice not only what feels off or uncertain, but to also notice what remains steady, present, or unchanged. So that's our perception. In interpretation, this follows almost immediately. Once we notice something, the mind immediately begins to try and make sense of it. And these interpretations happen quickly and draw heavily on our prior experience. And environments where difficult patterns repeat, interpretation can become compressed. We begin to rely on familiar conclusions because they've been useful to us before. And that can be efficient, but it can also limit our sense of nuance. And this is another place that we have influence, because in the fast-moving moments of the sea of hopelessness and despair, we can hold our initial conclusions just a little more lightly, allowing for the possibility that there's more here than what first appears. And so as a former intelligence officer, my line was always, the first report is suspect, right?
Right. Yeah.
So we can loosen our grip with interpretation, right? And then finally, in response, this is what we've noticed and we've interpreted it, then we act, but our response might be verbal, it could be behavioral. Maybe we choose not to respond at all. But over time, responses become pattern, reflecting both training and adaptation. And that can be more reactive than responsive. But this is also where we can begin to interrupt the pattern. Even a brief moment of awareness, a slight pause, can create enough cognitive space to respond with greater intention than simply reacting on instinct.
James,
So, yes.
if I may,
Yeah.
you talk about this pause a lot, and I think of Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl, where
Mhm.
we've kind of talked about in the context of his experience and need to share with others what he came to understand through his own experience,
Yes.
that there is a millisecond, there is a moment
Yes.
where agency can be brought to bear over our emotional state, which, as you know, is the message of Tony Blauer, our good friend for the last 40 years, and so many others who have said the mind navigates the body. It's not the other way around.
Exactly, and it's almost like you're my straight man. I have a slide for that, so I just
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
no,
Yeah.
no, it's not actually it's not part of my presentation proper, but I always have it with me because there's so much power in this idea of choice.
Yes.
And so this is an actual quote from Viktor Frankl: between stimulus and response, there is a space. And in that space is our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our freedom. And
Amen.
he
Yeah.
really nailed that. And he used those 4 subcomponents of choice, that we have this incredible capacity for self-awareness, that I can observe myself moving through the world. And that second, I have a sense of conscience, a sense of what's right and wrong. And that sort of gives me a compass point for navigating difficult or ambiguous situations. And then one of the things that he found was so powerful in his book, Man's Search for Meaning, that he has an imagination, that he could imagine another reality other than the one that he was currently inside of. And of course, this is when he was in the midst of the concentration camp in World War II. And then finally, and this is really the choice component, hey, we have independent will. We can actually decide how we want to respond. And that sets us apart
Yes.
from all the other, living things in the world. So, yeah, I'm glad you took that side trip. That's such
Yeah.
a powerful concept for sure. Let's see. I want to get back to where I was, which was we went through reactive. So let's pull it all together now. Okay. So taken together, perception, interpretation, and response form this continuous loop. And whether we realize it or not, we're moving through that loop all the time. It's where adaptation is happening moment by moment. And that gives us a constant opportunity for influence as we move through this loop. So once we come into awareness of this process, the opportunity to influence it becomes possible. Up to this point, our focus has been on how the environment shapes us, but self-awareness can also begin to change how we see the environment itself and how we're moving through it. You might call this something like meta-awareness. That is,
Right.
your ability to observe yourself within the environment and within the moment. Excuse me. In complex systems, this enhanced understanding has the ability to change our perception and how we interpret it. It's a sort of a reframing of the environment, if you will. The more we understand how something works, how patterns form, how signals connect, the less chaotic it appears, not because it becomes simple, but because it becomes more intelligible. And as we discussed, the psychosocial ecosystem of the sea is complex, layered, and ambiguous. It's not random, it's shaped by human history, context, and a deep meaning that isn't always visible on the surface. Because of this, the way we interpret that complexity is critical. In these waters, we need an anchor that holds firm, yet flexes with the shifting currents and eddies of human crisis. We need a framework that allows us to stay regulated, curious, and open while simultaneously remaining mindful, ready, and committed to an atmosphere of personal safety and security. And so this brings forward sort of my fundamental line, which is heart and courage. So
Yeah.
heart and courage is kind of this truth and tension. And Andy, you've heard me say that line many times before. But it actually brings forward this concept that I'm starting to call tempered empathy. And by this, I mean a practiced ability to deeply understand and resonate with another person's emotional state while also maintaining a clear, distinct boundary between their experience and your own.
Oh my gosh, James, I'm loving the qualification of tempered
Thank you.
before empathy, because I'm going to take a moment to just elaborate on this.
Yeah.
And I've shared this with you previously. It's been our experience in human services that people who work in, let's say, clinical or um, behavioral health oriented job classes
Mm-hmm.
are generally very, very strong on empathy. But when we have to get to a discussion about policy, rules, laws, shared values, they can feel a little like it's unfamiliar territory
Yes.
because their training and practice has been in unconditional support.
Mm-hmm.
When we work with people who are in enforcement job classes, security, adult corrections, juvenile
Right.
justice, public
Yes.
safety, they're very strong on rules
Mm-hmm.
and feel like empathy is unfamiliar territory.
Absolutely.
To influence, you need both.
Yep.
And the word empathy doesn't capture both, but
Correct.
this phrase does.
Thank you.
Tempered empathy.
Yeah. Thank you so much. I
Yeah.
have to honestly tell you, as I've been really wrestling with this concept for the last, well, at least 6 months. And tempered empathy really came forward to me literally just this week as I was trying to reach for the language. Because if you'll notice in the general conversation around some of the social issues that we face today as a society, I'm starting to hear the phrase suicidal empathy
Oh,
or
yes.
unbridled empathy, and
Yes.
and and so
These
I
are extremes. These are
these are
extremes that don't capture the nature of what we're trying to point to here.
right.
And I'll even go so far as to say um, the phrase that I think can be misleading um, is the phrase that is commonly kicked about, known as tactical empathy, which was
Mm,
coined by a particular um, negotiation celebrity, let's
okay.
say.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
I always experienced that term as disingenuous use of empathy to
mhm,
reach strategic goals.
mhm. Yes.
And I never liked it. But
Yeah.
tempered empathy is empathy that has been, um, the tempering process in hardening steel. After something has been made hard, it is drawn back from its brittleness to
Right.
something that is um,
Strong but flexible.
yes, yes, and not brittle
I
and
love that.
durable. So, um, you know, you really go. This is like splitting the arrow in terms of its accuracy. This
Thank
phrase.
you.
Thank you for
Well,
conceiving
and
of it.
I want to say you've all heard it first because it's just recently come forward to me in my awareness. Generally at 3 o'clock in the morning when I'm still contemplating things like
Yeah,
this.
yeah. This
Yeah,
is
I'm
worthy
very.
of a short video. Right now on LinkedIn. Tempered empathy
Mhm,
and defining it. I think it's such a
mhm.
one, particularly with the Forged in Fire kind of programs on
Love
TV
that.
all over the
Yes.
place.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody knows what tempering is now.
Well,
You're
and as a knife maker, you have a deep understanding of that tempering process. That's
Yeah, well, yeah. I
I
I
love
thought
that.
I did, but there's a lot to learn in heat treating. But
Oh gosh.
please continue. Yeah,
Well, I just want to say to operationalize this, we look at the two forces that create the temper and hold the balance, right? On the left is heart, our receptive presence. This is built on the bedrock of human dignity, right? Unconditional positive regard, the ability to feel the echo of another's distress and a sense of radical kinship that keeps us humanly connected. So you can hear echoes of Father Boyle in that. That radical kinship is a phrase he uses often.
yeah,
Dignity and worth, of course, based on unconditional positive regard, which is a concept that has by Carl Rogers, I think, brought that forward in the 50s. A
Yep.
very powerful concept. On the right is the protective integrity, right? This provides the necessary spine of clear sight to see reality as it is, the calibrated agency to hold others accountable for their choices, and the stable ground of compassionate detachment that ensures we remain an anchor rather than being swept away. Together, they form this concept of tempered empathy, an operational discipline that is as resilient as it is compassionate. So, and then just to take this thought exercise a little further, I want you to see tempered
Oh, great.
empathy as a three-dimensional construct. And this is the really important point I want to make here. Empathy here, tempered empathy, isn't a feeling, it's not a sentiment, it's not even a value, it's a core. I want us to think about it as a core operational discipline.
Yeah.
It's the heart to stay open and the courage to stay safe. And I think of it as a three-dimensional construct. And as such, I got thinking about flying an airplane, how we must constantly balance opposing forces to maintain tempered empathy. First, we have presence, and that's in the purple color there. This is how we manage our emotional altitude. In the airplane language, this is pitch, right? It requires the courage to stay steady between two extremes, reactive overwhelm on the one side and emotional shutdown on the other. By maintaining this compassionate detachment, we can control our emotional altitude. Second, we have perspective. This is how we level the wings. This is related to role.
Yeah.
We use the heart to check our biases while using courage to avoid over-identifying with the crisis. This is sort of an epistemic humility that keeps us upright. It allows us to ask what happened to you as a way of gathering intelligence rather than judging through the question, what's wrong with you, which is often a way of dismissing a person and their feelings and their experiences. This keeps our interactions balanced and upright. And then finally, the concept of yaw, which is the left and right, we talk about connection here. This is how we steer. We must navigate the narrow corridor between rigid control and meshed over connection. This is the radical reality of the situation, the courage to hold a firm boundary or take a tactical action because we value the dignity and safety of everyone involved. And this maintains our direction and safety. So how we stay steady and connected through tough psychosocial ecosystems is through this idea of tempered empathy, which is played out along these three axes.
It's a brilliant illustration and approach to really wrapping one's arms around this idea of tempered empathy. Thank you for this, James. Beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, I know it's a loaded slide. There's a lot of content on there, but I really do believe it can help foster a more stable and sustainable adaptation within really difficult psychosocial environments.
Yes.
Not because the work becomes easier necessarily, but I think because the environment becomes more intelligible. I think that's where the difference lies. So if the loop is where adaptation is shaped, then the question becomes practical. What does it look like to stay empathically oriented within that process, especially in real time, not in ideal conditions, but in the challenging terrain we've been discussing all along? And the answer is not a set of techniques. And I think you've had many conversations with people over time who are just looking for that checkbook and checklist answer. And there isn't one.
Right.
It's a mindset of staying and working inside of the loop. And so again, this is kind of a loaded slide, but it begins with being fully present, which I borrow from Father Boyle's books, the three words now, here, this. And the fact that he has that on a yellow sticky on his monitor in his office is so powerful, because it's a constant reminder that even he needs to stay present, stay in the moment. And if we're there in the moment, then we can go through the loop, the 1, 2, and 3. And in perception, it shows up as broader awareness. We're not ignoring what feels off or dangerous, That's our clear sight, and we're not consumed by it. But instead, we're able to take in more moment by moment, the tone, the pacing, the energy, and without immediately narrowing. And I just tried to put some language under each of those things. So under perception, I wrote, it might sound like this. I'm noticing a couple of different things here. Part of this feels steady and part feels a bit off. Can we take a look at both? So you can see the language there is to intentionally stay a little wider in the viewpoint of your
Yeah.
perception. And then second, in interpretation, it shows up as kind of a restraint. The mind still moves to make sense of what's happening, but we don't rush to settle in on a single meaning. There's a meaning. There's room for more than one possibility. It keeps us open, curious, and connected. And this is where epistemic humility lives. We allow for the possibility that what we're seeing may have more than one explanation. And by not locking in on a single narrative too heavily or too early, we keep our heart open to the what happened to you question versus what's wrong with you. So the language there is, I might be off here, but this is how I'm reading it. Help me understand what's going on from your perspective. And again, Andy, you're the master of language, so you might have some polish on these ideas, but that's sort of how I think interpretation might sound.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, it's hard to not look at these and not think of some other structures where these ideas are communicated. I think of the levels of validation in
Mm,
dialectic behavior therapy,
yes.
where we
Yep.
move from listening and observing all the
Mhm.
way to radical genuineness, for
Mhm.
example.
Mhm.
Um, uh, I also, when you started this slide, I was thinking of um, Jiddu Krishnamurti referring to active listening as the act of listening.
I love that.
And he
Mhm.
actually said, and I'll paraphrase it, um, he said, when we are truly attentive, when we are in now, here, this mode,
Yeah.
when we are truly attentive, someone else's opinions, statements, good, bad, mean, nice, whatever they are, um, when we're truly attentive, those things um, are like water washing over us because we are attentive to what is being said. The moment
Yeah.
I put up border, that's where conflict occurs.
Right.
So true attention, when true listening, when you're thoroughly invested in it, uh, is listening that does not account for what the statements are in relationship to you. They are merely observations of the statements alone.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's that neutral position.
Yes,
So powerful. Yeah, I
yes,
love that. I love that. Well, and then finally, just to finish the slide off, in response, it shows up as measured pace. Instead of being pulled into immediate action or reaction, there's just enough steadiness to choose how we engage. There's a level of intentionality there that I'm trying to bring forward. Sometimes that's a brief pause. Sometimes it's simply a more deliberate tone or a clearer boundary, but the response is no longer automatic or reactive. It's
right.
intentional. And of course that demands a level of uh, agency over yourself, right? That's where that self awareness becomes so important. Back to where it begins, right? So, I notice that when I get a little nervous, my rate of speech begins to climb, and suddenly I'm at 180 words a minute with gusts up to 300. When I sense that in myself, that's my cue to say, whoop, I'm a little emotionally charged here. I need to take a moment to slow things down, slow my own pace down. Breathing is the most powerful way to capture that. And then from that space, our responses can become more deliberate. And I think that gives us an ability to have more precise language. Our boundaries remain more clear and protective, but without becoming rigid. So that's how I would say we try to embody this concept of tempered empathy. Now, none of this removes the difficulty of the environment. The sea remains deep and its currents remain powerful. But by choosing tempered empathy, we change how we move within the environment. We replace unconscious automatic adaptation with a disciplined, intentional practice. And over time, those small daily shifts, the moment we choose heart over shutdown and courage over reactivity, they begin to accumulate and they influence more than just a single interaction. They shift the broader pattern of how we adapt to the work. This is the positive contagion effect. When we stay steady, it allows those around us to find their own footing. So, as we kind of bring this in for a landing today, remember that the environments you work in are complex, often ambiguous, and rarely within your control. And over time, they will have an impact on you, not because something's wrong with you, but because you're human and humans are designed to adapt. But by leading with heart and courage, you ensure that this impact doesn't break you, it tempers you. You become more resilient, more intelligible, and ultimately more capable of providing the transformative care that these environments so desperately need. So, if there's one thing I'd like to leave you with today, it's this. Much of what you experience in this work, the fatigue, the distance, the weight, is not a personal failing. It's a natural adaptive response to sustained exposure to a high cost environment.
Oh, yes.
But how you understand that adaptation changes how you carry it. When we see these shifts as shortcomings, our instinct is to push harder or maybe even turn that weight inward. But when we understand them as natural adaptations, and when we realize that we have the power to influence those adaptations, something steadier becomes possible. We aren't looking for less exposure or less difficulty. We're looking for a different way of standing in it. We're
Yes.
looking toward tempered empathy. And Marie Louise von Franz put it this way: it's easy to be a naive idealist, and it's easy to be a cynical realist. It's quite another thing to have no illusions and still hold the inner flame.
Yes.
So to have no illusions is the courage to see the radical reality of this work without flinching. To hold the inner flame in the heart is to maintain your radical kinship with the people that you serve. And to do both at once is to be tempered. It's how you stay in the fire without being consumed by it. And I just want to thank you, Andy, and thank all of those who have watched this. Thank you for your heart and your courage and for keeping that flame burning.
Oh my gosh, James. I feel like I've been in a homily for the last 40 minutes. So
I
well
told you it was
done.
going to be poetic.
It was, and it always is with you. And I think a reasonable question that someone might ask who's viewing this is, I want more heart and courage. I don't know how to get it. My employer, um, my employer doesn't prioritize
Yeah.
this, James.
Mhm.
What can I do to develop more heart and courage? What can I do to develop my tempering in my empathy so that I'm not afraid to be empathetic? I work in an environment where nobody appreciates that attribute, and I'm the only person who really does. And what's funny is that I'm generally the one who's called for the most extreme crises because I have this
Yeah.
capacity
Yeah.
to be courageous, but my employer doesn't value it. What can I do?
Man, that is such a difficult place to be in, no doubt. As you were speaking, I just remember one guy telling me, a mentor of mine, he said, James, bloom where you're planted.
Yeah.
And so I think we underestimate the impact of steady care, steady positioning. Um,
Incremental progress,
yeah,
I would
yeah,
also say,
because
is worthwhile, because what you bring out here is that the feeling that people can sometimes arrive at is normal, but they do not experience it as normal because it's so uncomfortable. It's
right,
signal that something's wrong.
right,
And
right.
it is a different capacity to say, like Dalton said in Roadhouse, Do you want a local? And while he's getting stapled, he said, pain doesn't hurt. And it wasn't a tough guy statement. It was, I'm going to feel the discomfort of this, and
Yeah.
I've come to accept
Yeah.
that it's part of being alive. Certainly part of my line of work. You got to staple me up. It
Yeah.
doesn't hurt me anymore. It's painful, but it
Yeah.
doesn't hurt.
Yeah.
Those are
That's
two different things.
powerful
And
distinction there for sure.
yeah,
And of course, the idea of resilience doesn't ignore the concept of robustness or reserve. Those would
right,
be two other forms, right? So,
right. Resilience
profession-
doesn't mean that discomfort goes away.
correct.
Resilience, you know,
100% correct. And so I think, there's always this concept of, professional development too, or the things that revive you. That's why, we think of the summer as a place of recreation. But if you take that word apart, it's recreation, right? It's
yes.
and so are you looking for relief or are you looking for restoration? There are things that you'll want to avail yourself to outside of the professional arena that will restore your soul, restore your emotional balance and capacity. Those are certainly important things we should bring into the workplace. And you said at the start of this of our time together today that I have some lived experience. Well, even in my own background, a lot of the research that I've done about trauma informed care is me search. It's me making sense of my own lived experience and my own family of origin. And so I'll often find, tremendous insights and motivation from books like The Body Keeps the Score by Besser van der Kolk, or In an Unspoken Voice by Peter Levine, or
Yes.
The Mind Body Connection, Gabor Mate's book, When the Body Says No. These are powerful professional works, and you just can't read those and not be changed. And I think it bolsters that idea that I can move through the most difficult psychosocial ecosystems in a way that is sustainable over time.
And
Shift.
James, I'd also say that your professional experience also exposed you to the expression of some forms of human potential that most people
Oh,
never got to see. You
absolutely.
witnessed people survive some of the most horrible
Hmm.
life circumstances that could be experienced by a human being,
Yes.
and they were able to live with that,
Yes.
and not be, let's say, permanently disabled as a
Well, you're
result.
right. And look, the physical discomfort and deprivations that these men and women went through were extreme. The psychological distress that they experienced in the moment was again off the charts,
Yeah.
extreme. But every one of them came home, right? I mean,
Right. Right.
and so then the question becomes, now what do I do? And so metabolizing that experience and making sense of it and realizing, life on the planet can be a difficult place, but
Yeah.
your story is bigger than that moment. Your
Yeah.
story is bigger than your current circumstances.
You know,
And
our good James, our good friend Colonel Dave Grossman refers to that as post-traumatic growth. There, there is there is post-traumatic growth potential in the
yeah.
miracle of the human species.
Yes, exactly. A good friend of mine calls it an AFOG, another effing opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
Sounds like an AFOG to me, James.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, your message, which is always so very uh, beautiful, and you leverages, timeless principles, but you offer such extraordinary and imaginative ways to get a hold of some of these principles. That empathy is not a technique, it is something that is lived and must be durable and
Yes.
hold two things in tension.
Yeah.
That the journey to heart and courage includes me search, It's
Yes.
an invitation to a journey for you
Mhm.
to better understand yourself,
Mhm.
how you think, the way you think, how you feel, why you feel the way you feel,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
to bring those things into the light so that your experience can be more adaptable to what really is a growing demand in our world right now
Oh, it is.
for for people with heart and courage like we support at Hope Reform to go out
Absolutely.
there and support people who are in that part of the continuum way,
Right.
way, way downstream.
Exactly. And all of that in the context of a larger story, of a story bigger than you. And that's what I think when my story gets constrained, when I feel run down and sort of beaten down and my story narrows, that's when I become petty.
Yeah,
That's when I become, I'm tripping over the trifles.
yeah,
And so, I often say to people, hold the vision and trust the process.
yeah,
So
yeah.
the question is, what if everything in life that happened to you happened for you instead of happening to you? And if you hold on to that, that's like, wow. So this experience is
For
another
me.
opportunity for growth. It's for me, right? And for the people that I'm interacting with.
What
And
a powerful one. What if everything that was happening to you was happening for you?
correct.
What if all experiences could be filtered through the sentence of that lens?
Yeah,
This is
exactly.
happening for me. What the hell is happening for me right now? I mean,
Yes,
the
right.
funny ways you can play with that.
Absolutely.
Did you see what just happened for me? You know? Meanwhile, it's some,
Right.
a car accident,
That's
but it
right.
happened for me,
And all through this concept of self-agency. Nobody's going to make it for you. I can't chew your food. I often tell people, I'm sorry. I
Yeah.
can, and we have proverbs, right? You can lead a horse to water, but you can't make it
Yeah.
drink. I mean, that is that
I can't
concept of
chew your food
agency.
for you. That's
Yeah.
funny. Yeah. Well, James, it's always so inspiring and fertily creative to engage these ideas the way that you embody them and present them. And I hope that people who consume this today are leaving this session with hope, with a interest in heart and courage, tempered empathy, me search, and James, talk a little bit about how people can link up with you or learn more about you and your work.
Well, thank you. You'll see me on LinkedIn quite a bit. I run a what I call a small boutique consultancy at Regulus NW. That's for Northwest, regulusnw.com. You can see my website there. I tend to be more of a generalist than a specialist. So I work with a lot of organizations, just helping them sort of make sense of the milieu they find themselves in. Um, and sometimes that's a business consulting. Sometimes that's helping put workplace violence prevention programs in place, that sort of thing. So
Yes.
if you have an inclination, reach out. We
Yep.
can have
And
a
I'm also
conversation.
going to add that with every organization that I have introduced to James with special needs that I thought James was perfect for, every single one of those organizations has come back to me and reported that they were better for the experience
Oh, thank
in
you. I'm
linking up
honored.
with James Sporleder. So
I'm honored by that.
James,
Thank you.
thank you for everything today. For those of you who have enjoyed this session, please consider providing a donation to Hope Reform. There will be links in the comments below when this is on YouTube, which will be in a couple of hours from now, that will allow you to explore how to support Hope Reform. You can visit hopereform.org to learn more about our organization. Consider visiting Regulus Northwest, regulusnw.com to learn more about the great James Sporleder and his work. And thank you for being with us as we discuss all month in the month of April 2026 matters that pertain to the wellness of one of our most cherished workforces, and that is the human services workforce.
Mm.
Thank you all. Thank you, James. Take good care.
Thank you. Take care.